What if burnout wasn't a problem to fix, but a signal guiding you toward deeper alignment with life? The Practice Podcast invites you to explore how aligning with your energy can transform your connection to yourself, your relationships, and your work. Through real stories, data-driven insights, and life-centered tools, each episode helps you tune into your body's signals and create life-affirming change from the inside out. Welcome to the Practice Podcast. Today's member spotlight on the Practice Podcast is someone who is learning how to embody energetic literacy in the wild, inside of her creativity, her leadership, her family, her community. Ashley Falls is a creative and cultural leader, writer, and managing director at the Clios, and she has spent her career building spaces where things like creativity, people, and meaning intersect. Ashley so generously shares with us both the breakthroughs and the disruptions that have occurred since embracing the principles of energetic literacy. In this conversation, we explore Ashley's understanding of energy from the very beginning, and then her understanding of embodiment and the conditions that make her truly productive. This is what the work looks like once it leaves the 30-day experience and it starts to enter real life.
I grew up in rural Kentucky where, there was no access to anything spiritual, a lot of religion, but
Right.
not access to an understanding of how to truly care for ourselves. And, especially in rural areas of the US, it's kind of quite the opposite where people aren't taking the best care of their bodies. Meditation is not something people do. There weren't even yoga studios where I grew up. I think there was one gym. So I think for me, this became a life skill because I knew I needed something else to survive, to figure out how to connect with my being. I just growing up in this small place, I knew that I didn't fit there. I was a big fish in a small pond, and I knew that I wanted to move to the more urban areas. And I didn't necessarily know why that calling was in me, but I knew from a very young age it was there. And so once I got to more urban areas and had more access to self improvement tools, I dived right in. Like in college, I started taking courses on yoga because, I knew nothing about it, but I was so fascinated by it. And, not even necessarily the body movement, but the history behind all of it, the richness of how it was about connecting with your mind, your body, and soul and building alignment, something that I felt so distanced from. And so I think I probably started with yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And then I read a book that talked about meditating. Mm-hmm. And it didn't really tell you how to meditate. There was a passage in it where the writer talked about meditating. And so I tried it. I found a mantra and started using that. And for 10 minutes a day, I would sit there and try to meditate. And at first, it wasn't much that was happening, but like slowly I'd start to feel like a tingle in my hands. And then, the more years I practiced, and I think I started in 2012, I was around 25. And the more that I practiced with that, I started feeling more connected to myself. And I grew up really anxious. I was riddled with anxiety, and just imposter syndrome. And that only got stronger as I moved to to the bigger areas. It never left me that, I was a small town Kentucky girl trying to make it in the city.
Mm-hmm.
But as much as those voices were loud and disruptive, they never stopped me. Like, it wasn't, I knew that I was on a mission to go somewhere. The destination wasn't necessarily clear, but I knew I was going. And the more I meditated, the more that trust in myself grew. And so it was interesting that year 2012. I was not. I had graduated undergrad a year or so before. I was on the path for law school. I was in undergrad a creative writing major and literature. Um, and but growing up with not much, I knew that being a lawyer was a practical path that would provide stability and security, which was something I didn't have a lot of. And so I was following that practicality. And in that year, um, I was working as a paralegal for a foreclosure law firm in Cincinnati. And I happened to be on the bank side. And I had just had that urge to, let's go get some practice before I actually start law school. I had already taken the LSAT. I had all of my applications filled out, but I had this urge in me to, let's go see what this is like. Because I wanted to be a lawyer because I loved movies about law. These incredible summation speeches that they gave at the end of the movie that just shifted the entire perspective. Basically, I loved the writing. And so that in my head was what being a lawyer was going to be.
Totally. For me, it was also about the fashion. I was like, suits, pencil skirts.
Yes, I would have rocked a tie all the time. It would have been great, and had some great glasses to go with it. But that was the plan, and my parents were completely on board with me being a lawyer because, again, having one stable person in the family felt like a great plan. And so then I worked for this foreclosure law firm, and all it was pushing paper and being on the bank side. I was foreclosing on people that I knew. I was representing the whole state of Kentucky and having to look, things were coming up from the county where I grew up. And, it was not long after the financial crisis, people were in such a tough spot. And I was part of the process of taking away their homes. And something inside me cracked, and I was like, I can't do this. And so one night, this was after I had started meditating. I woke up in the middle of the night, and something inside me was like, you remember that city, Savannah, where you visited a few years ago, and they had that incredible art school. You need to go look at their website. And
so you had an intuition.
I did. Yeah. And at that point, I didn't even know what it was.
What it was.
For a long time, I thought I was crazy because I was hearing this voice in my head. And again, no one in my life meditated or was in touch with themselves in that way. So I had no one to talk to. And, even then, the internet didn't have all the access to spiritual stuff that it does now. And so, part of me thought I was going crazy, but the other part of me thought that I should listen to this voice. And so I decided there in the middle of the night that I was going to go study film for a year. I had grown up loving film. My mom was obsessed with classic Hollywood. And, I'm so grateful for that because we had so little access to museums, or we didn't even have a movie theater in our town. But because she had this VHS collection and a subscription to Turner Classic Movies, I was exposed to the film industry and to that piece of culture. And so I loved film, and, being from Kentucky, like, I always pretended there was a pathway to having a job in entertainment. I just didn't know what it was. I knew I didn't want to be an actress. I loved writing. That has been my passion since I learned how to write. Um, and so at that time, I thought I wanted to be a film critic. And so, middle of the night, I applied to grad school, and then I got accepted and got offered some scholarships. And so then it became the tough conversation of telling my parents that I'm not going to law school. In fact, I'm going to go get a master's degree in cinema studies. And they're like, okay, so you have a bachelor's in English and creative writing, and now you're going to get a master's at a private school in cinema studies. So basically your intention is to never have a job. And so I heard them. I knew the practicality, but I also knew, like, there was no going back. Like, I was going to do this. And so I went, and I had two big rescue dogs that I had found when they were puppies in Cincinnati, and they went to Savannah with me. I down there, I did my master's in 3 quarters, including submitting my thesis. Like, I knew how expensive school was, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to build more debt than I was already going to be in. So I did it as quickly as I could. And after that, I went to New York with $3,000 saved and a lot of hope and those two big dogs. And that's my very first interview in New York was with Clio, the company I'm still with today. And I've been there for 12 years. But for me, what New York became was this pool of access to spiritual possibilities. I had continued meditating and yoga through grad school, but when I got to New York, there was so many more options. I got trained in transcendental meditation. I went to every type of yoga class I could possibly find, from uh, I really enjoyed Kundalini yoga, Hatha yoga, like anything I could find, I was trying it. I was just fascinated by it all, and I wanted to learn. And I remember when I did the transcendental meditation, the teacher told me, he was like, "You're a seeker," and I hadn't heard that term before, but it resonated, and so I just continued following that path. And my job is an incredibly extroverted role. Like, I am a community builder. I am always out talking to people. I do a lot of, operations. But I'm a introverted person. Like, I am, I I've done every personality test I can, and every time it comes up as a big old introvert. So those tools that I was learning were how I was able to survive in my career, and not just survive, but thrive. Like, I did really well to where, they kept giving me opportunities at work to expand and to grow. And I know with certainty that had I not been using those spiritual tools at that time, it wouldn't have happened, because back then, like, the term burnout wasn't talked about the way it is now. And I was thinking about this before our call today, that, like, I ever since I was in high school, I had periods of experiencing burnout. I just didn't know then what it was. After college every year, at the end of the semesters, I would be taken down for like 2 weeks with an illness every time, just because it was my body coming down off of the high of that semester pushing through. For my current job, like we are, we're busy all year, but there's a certain season when we're at our busiest where we're gearing up for our award show. And I run our entertainment division. So every November we have this giant award show at the Dolby Theater with like 2,000 people. And during that 4-week period, we do our judging sessions and get our winners in. And then we have 4 weeks to produce the entire award show. And after that period, I always get a cold. I always get the flu, something. It never fails. Even no matter how hard I try to take care of myself, it always happens. And I just know that like I wouldn't be where I am in my career had I not had access to all of those tools. But what I also know is that up until last summer, I knew nothing about embodiment. Despite all of the things that I had studied and learned, and I am someone who is always reading. I have 5 books sitting beside me on the couch right now. Like I am always learning, but embodiment wasn't something that I had come across before or taken the time to understand. And so last year, I started really getting in touch with my body. Again, I had done yoga, I was a runner, but I started getting into strength training last year. And then I started learning more about embodiment techniques. And so what I what I was realizing was like I was so out of touch with listening to my body and listening to the signs that my body was giving me of telling me when I was overtired, when I needed to rest. I didn't even know how to rest. Like I still struggle with rest, like because resting for me is I can lay here, but I should be reading a book or I could be meditating. I can't just be. And that's something that I'm working on and really trying to ground myself in now. But when I started learning about SORCE, this was the fascinating thing because we first chatted in January. I was just coming out of my burnout season, like it happens every December, because again, I get to the end of my award show, then I'm straight into holiday season. Both of my children have their birthdays at that time. So it is wild. And so I was coming out of burnout season and you all had told me about SORCE and, I had heard about it prior from Pat. And, I've always been intrigued by energy. I think that there's so much to it. And in right after the pandemic, I got certified in Reiki because shortly after becoming a mom in 2020, I went in for a Reiki session. I had never even heard of Reiki, but somebody was like, oh, you should try this. And so I went in and I felt it in my body. I felt like that deep connection. And I also then started studying it. And what I learned was, how much it impacts people and the trauma in their bodies and, how trauma can manifest into so many different things. Well, my 2 dogs that had been with me for years at this point, they were getting old, and knew that Reiki could be very healing or help transition them for, what was inevitably coming. But I also had my mom who had a lot of autoimmune diseases. I fully believe from a lot of the trauma that was kept in her body. She never, in rural Kentucky, therapy was frowned upon. And she never did anything to deal with that. And so she didn't have you didn't see people doing Reiki in Kentucky, at least not anywhere near where we were. And she didn't have the finances to do it anyway. So I got certified in it, knowing that I could do distance healings on her. And so through the Reiki, I learned so much about energy.
Mm.
And I knew that it could move through me and it could calm me, just a 20-minute session. But again, like, I still didn't have that connection to understanding embodiment. So I was doing the Reiki on myself. I was doing it on, my friends. And I did it on my mom for a bit, but I was missing that tie of embodiment of, I knew energy was important and I could feel the energy moving through me, but I didn't understand how to truly stay in my body. And when I started working with you all on Source, that was the first time that I learned that your body is always talking to you. You just have to be willing to listen. And it was so hard for me to accept, um,
Oh, yeah. Say
because
more. Yeah.
yeah, I understood that, I do love data. And so, like, seeing data, having data points, you know, doing the score every morning, I was so excited by the prospect
Mhm.
until it started
Oh.
telling me that I I couldn't do my rigorous routine. And,
Mhm.
I I wake up at 3 a.m. I
Mhm.
meditate, I go to the gym, I write for an hour and a half. Then my kids start waking up, and then I go into my real job. And from there, my day just goes with endless meetings and things like that. So when I started doing Source, and it was telling me I had a recover day when I needed to go do my strength training that day,
Yeah.
or I needed to run 5 miles that day. It was really disruptive in
Mm.
my lifestyle. And I was so frustrated by it at first. It was really just like, I found it very annoying. And it but what it made me realize was, like, this awful little drill sergeant in my head that was, like, just telling me to keep going, 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 and not actually listening to what my body needed. And so, like, I don't think I actually understood embodiment until I went through that experience of the cohort. Um And it was fascinating because I I committed to doing it, and when I say I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do something. And so, like, those 30 days, I listened to it when it told me I had a recover day, even though I didn't want a recover day that day. And I took your all's guidance, and I, rescheduled meetings when I could. I canceled workouts. I, rebuilt my life around that morning score. And, at one point I remember thinking, gosh, can it give me my score in advance so I can better accustom my schedule? But I stuck with it. And what I found was fascinating. Like, I had started writing a book the second week of January, and I started the cohort, I think, the third week of January. And, I'm a writer always, but my level of productivity actually grew
Interesting.
during that 30-day cohort. And it wasn't just that, like, my productivity grew, but the depth of what I was writing for a first draft was much stronger than usual. My first drafts are typically more skeletons. This was, like, really meaty. And so that 30-day period, was a lot about surrender for me, and learning that, like, my body is talking to me, and I just had to I had to stop being stubborn and listen. So that was the longest answer. I'm sorry, I took that a lot of ways.
But this is what happens when we start talking about energy. Like, I
Yeah,
think we started out just going, is this energetic literacy? Is this a leadership tool? Is this just a life tool? Like,
yeah,
it's most definitely both, but
yeah,
when you start to tug on that thread of energy, you're like, okay, so the first time that I became aware of energy was this, and then it was like, tuk, 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 and then you gained. I'm just going to reflect back to you now. The
yeah.
summation is like, and you gained through your willingness to operate from another part of yourself. So instead of the one that was coloring by numbers, that was like,
Yeah,
okay, so to get certainty and safety, I'm going to become a lawyer. Then all of a sudden, there was a crisis of the heart where it was like, uh-oh, if I keep pursuing this, I can see that there's something lacking, like a wholeness, or it doesn't feel so life affirming. When the actions you started to see the ripple effects of the
mhm,
actions of that choice, and then it was like, now you're entering the unknown. You're
yeah,
walking right into the mystery, and one of the most profound things that someone can do is just start to have the courage to step into the mystery or the unknown. Some of the most emergent, creative, wonderful things happen when you finally go, I don't know. We're taught not to say that, not
mhm.
to say I don't know, but some of the most
Scary.
incredible things are like, I don't know, show me. So it's like this, it's like this request to the cosmos of like, show me. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to show you. And you're like, what? Grad school and cinema? But
Yeah,
you started to feel the aliveness. And it was
mhm,
like you started to follow something that was not logical.
yeah,
And and that showed you many practices, and then you get to this point where you realize, okay, so I am an infinite being. And in many ways, ask and it is given. Like, I have found myself in a bit of a dream scenario with your job, and thinking that, how did all these things just kind of come together? And yet then you feel the boundless and the limitlessness of your spirit, but then you feel the finite limitations of the body, because we are kind of interfacing with these two components. And so
mhm,
it's like, how do you reconcile the infinite nature of yourself and energy and the finite resources of the body? And that's when I think you land into this uh, energetic literacy aspect being important for you, because you're like, okay, listen, girl, when I hear about your day and that you wake up at 3 a.m. and that you meditate and that you have 2 kids and you got this full-time job and you're a community builder, it's just like, you are a beast, and you're so disciplined, and you're right on it. And I so deeply appreciate you saying, but when I come upon this fact that I can't just endlessly give, that I got to actually draw some boundaries here, that's frustrating, because you're such a giver. You're such like a voracious giver. And
I yeah.
yeah, what did you, yeah,
I wish there was endless giving, like,
I
and I
know.
know, boundaries are so hard.
They're
That's
so
what I'll say.
hard. And we can only be generous givers if, and this is the big point of source, and why we do things the way we do things. If you want to be a generous giver, if you want to be a powerful leader, you
Yeah,
really do have to um, honor your boundaries. And that's just the name of the game now. And the cool part is that we can stretch the boundaries over time, but only if we're in a real-time conversation with both the objective signals of the body and the subjective elements of our experience. So thank you for walking us through how you get here. And I'm curious as to now that you've have you overcome the frustration? Is it still present? How are we feeling in the development of timing efforts with precision is so much more essential than just pedal to the metal day in and day out. How are we doing with that inside of your being now?
It's getting easier.
Okay, cool.
It is, it is, because now I'm kind of like, when I wake up, I can almost feel it in my body what
Mhm.
it's going to be.
Mhm.
And so that's that's been great. I'll say, like, even this week
Mhm.
on Tuesday, or yeah, it was Tuesday, I had a unexpected recover day. And I think it was just, coming off of a holiday weekend. My son
Mhm.
was on spring break last
Right.
week. It was just a lot of energy. And so usually on Tuesdays, I am either a maintain day or a push day. It honestly had it happen that I had a recover day on a Tuesday. And it was significant because I work with a trainer on Tuesdays for strength
Yep.
training.
Yep.
And so usually Tuesdays is my go hard day. And so I got into the gym, and because, if I cancel day of, then I lose the session. So I knew I had to go in, but then having to explain to my trainer,
Yeah.
actually, I'm on a recover day. And he was like, what
Yeah.
the hell is a recover day?
Great.
Yeah. And so I pulled out the app and I showed it to him. And he was like, how long are you going to be doing this? And I was like, I don't know, maybe for the rest of my life. And he was
Uh,
like, so we're just gonna change things today. And I was like, yes, we're gonna do things a little different today.
yeah.
And so there's still moments like that where I have to figure out how I'm gonna pivot. But it has gotten easier, and it has made good adjustment in my life. Now, what I'll say is that there's also certain periods in, like, my work schedule where I can do my best to adhere to
Yeah.
what the data's telling me. But
Mhm.
as an example, last month in early March, I had to go to South by Southwest. And,
Mhm.
like, when I'm there, I'm representing our whole company. Like, I was doing
Mhm.
panels, I was out with clients, every day, every night. And again, for an introvert, it's a lot of
It's a
energy
lot.
coming out and
Yeah.
not the time to recharge. At home, I build it into my life to take that time to recharge. But on a trip like that, I can't. So, like, when it was telling me I had a recover day, when I had a full day of work ahead of me, I had to keep powering through. And what happened was I did, after that, experience a mini burnout again. But what I also noticed was that I was much more aware of it this time.
Yeah.
I knew why it was happening,
Yep.
and it made me it made me rethink, like, because I do travel a lot for my job, like, how can I honor what my body's telling me when I'm in these situations when I do have to keep going? And so, trying to figure out if that means, like, wherever I am, finding a sauna or somewhere where I can go and sit and recharge, because I have noticed that, like, even on recovery days, if I give myself like an extra, I always meditate in the morning, but if I can find 20 minutes in the afternoon to also
Mm-hmm.
do a meditation,
Mm-hmm.
it will help me recharge a bit more.
Totally.
And so I think that's kind of where I am right now. Like, I'm very
Mm-hmm.
aware
Mm-hmm.
of what the data is telling me, and I know the truth of it. Like, I know
Mm-hmm.
that if I follow what it's telling me, like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get to a good place where I've been on a week-long streak of maintained days before, which to me is great. Like, I
Yeah.
enjoy push days when they come up, but if I have a maintained day, like, and I can stay steady with my routine, then that's great. But I'm right now, I'm at a point where I'm just evaluating how do I take the information being given to me, knowing that if I don't listen to it,
Yeah.
I am going to suffer for it,
Yep.
and figuring out how I can work those two pieces together.
Yeah, I think that's very astute and right on time for where you're at on the journey because initially, um, it can feel like this is impossible. Like, there's no way I can take this recover day. And then we get over that hump where it's like, well, listen, you probably can just close the door of the bathroom for like 15 minutes and give
Yep.
yourself just a little bit of your own presence. And that might be what you do on your recover day. So there's always, it's like, we got to get over the limiting belief that there's nothing we can do. There's a lot of things that we can do. So then we get over that hump and we start to understand, oh, yeah, this has pliability. Okay, so now instead of pushing through on a recover day with my trainer, I'm going to tell my trainer that I have a recover day. Is that disruptive to him? Yes, it is. Is that okay? Yes, it is. Because we need everybody that has the intent of unlocking potential to
Mhm.
understand how this vehicle works. And to
Yeah.
double down on bad strategies is insane. We're not doing
Yeah.
that. We're saying, okay, I'm going to make one concession. Is it going to be, a total overhaul today where it's like a perfect recover day? Probably not, probably very rare that happens. But every concession that you make, every bit of energetic currency that you don't spend on that day and you keep in will fortify your baseline, will get you back to baseline faster and faster and faster. Now, the objective data is one of the elements of energetic literacy. The other element that we use, so for anybody that's brand new, we use energetic literacy is the ability to understand, manage, and renew your energy using your whole brain. And we track things left brain objectively using HRV because it is very much factual. And then we have this other tool that we use for your right brain capacities, your subjective, your somatic, your intuitive. And we use something called the energetic literacy assessment. We look at 3 dimensions, which is your connection to yourself, your connection to others, your connection to work. And we look at 5 stages of behavior change. We look at your willingness to stay connected to your energy, your awareness of your energy, your ability to articulate what is happening inside of your body or the dynamic. And then we look, are you taking action from what you know, what you know to be true? And then finally, we look at reflection. And what we find is that many times, because people haven't been taught to validate their right brain information. Let's go back to your story, Ashley, of like following your intuition was never championed. Maybe people never said to you, well, what do you feel in your body when you think about that decision? That
Never
wasn't
once.
happening. The
Never
right
once.
brain elements of our intelligence have essentially been, kind of quieted or brushed under the rug. And it's important that if we want to be healthy, well balanced, that we bring all of this right brain capacity back into the conversation. So with that, talk to me now about what you are noticing when you take your energetic literacy assessments. Talk to me about the patterns that you see of like, I'm really strong here, and this is actually where I'm slipping off of my information. And then talk to me about the dimension that feels most challenging for you in regards to your energetic literacy.
Yeah, that so last month was my first time going through that process,
Right,
and it
right.
was very, very fascinating because taking that assessment score, I think, you know, the first time going through it, I was just answering the questions, based off of my gut reaction to them. But then to step back and see the pattern with my answers was really fascinating because my awareness was strong. I'm very, very aware of my energy. Like, I know when I wake up and my energy is low. Like I am attuned to that. Um, but where I scored lowest across the board was articulation. And I I was kind of surprised with that because
Right.
I at least in writing, I feel like I'm very good at articulating where I'm at. But it is in the articulation of, I guess, more vocal articulation where I struggle. Like
Mm,
being able to show up to a meeting and, where I'm supposed to be, the leader on the call and being able to articulate to my team where I am at. Um I think it at first was a little intimidating, um, because am I gonna be looked at differently because I'm saying my energy is low today? Um, but then I also, like, I'm a very empathetic person and especially very empathetic with my team. I am always the person who will tell them, "Take a mental health day." Like, take time for whatever you need. If you're not feeling well, you take the day off. Like, I will always be the first one to say that to my team, but not to myself.
mhm.
And so that was something that, like, I started realizing through that. Um, and, even being able to articulate it with my children. Like, I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. They are just, learning their own emotions. We're
Right.
practicing
Amazing.
emotional regulation. Like, we have a calm corner in our house. And
Amazing.
that's I think that was one of the hard things was, like, being able to figure out how to communicate it with them who, again, they're just learning their feelings and being able to tell them, "Mommy's energy's low today." Like, "Mommy doesn't let's cuddle and read a book versus running outside and playing." And I think that became, like, a great learning experience for me because it was definitely something I never heard my parents say. And I am, as a parent, I am I'm really hell bent on making sure that, like, my kids understand their feelings and, accept their feelings. And I just don't want them spending their whole lives being at war with who they are. And I think that starts with accepting what you're feeling. And so being being told in this practice that part of the practice is communicating with the people around you how you're feeling was kind of a beautiful gift in disguise because, like, this is something that like my kids are now learning at age 2 and age 5 that, I'm just learning at age 39. So like I think about it all the time. Like I have so much hope for that generation because so many parents out there are doing work on themselves right now that like our parents didn't have the tools
Right.
for.
Yeah.
And so like if if they're learning these things at such a young age, what a loving generation they might be. And, they might be the generation to heal the world. So, like, as I was going through the practice last month and, teaching myself that it's okay to articulate where I'm at, um, it's safe to do that. I was also at the same time demonstrating for them that it's safe to do that.
That's right.
And that's going to be a beautiful ripple effect into the future.
I feel that deeply when you say it. For your children, there's no greater motivation that it's just really understanding they will learn through you, not teaching them what to do, but by you embodying back to the embodiment piece. I think
Yeah.
sometimes about, I struggled with feelings of, fear of failure. If I got to see my parents kind of work through that in themselves, I might have had a map, you know? All I saw was my parents winning, not failing, and not having to contend with emotions. And I really did my best to take what they were showing me and using it. And that was brush it under the rug, suck it up, keep it moving. And my body was fragmenting, and I had enough of that, what is called interoception. It's just something that I was wired with, where I can just feel the energetics of that choice inside, and it was actually tearing me apart. And so to invite the emotion in, to give the emotion safety to be here, and then to be able to communicate it always with, to the best of your ability, doesn't always happen, kindness, love, compassion, but to communicate it so that we create safety to be human, not these robots. So thank you for sharing that. And it's you're a writer. You have the gift of language, and still, so for anybody, out there feeling like, man, I'm never going to be able to articulate what it is. Yes, you will, with time, attention, dedication. And this is just novel terrain that all of us are walking together. All of us are walking this together, some maybe just a little bit further ahead, but not by much. And we are creating new connective tissue in terms of how we can be with each other. And it's beautiful. So thank you for that piece. I want to, we've talked a lot about just like life and energy and journey. And if we can, maybe get a little bit more focused on leadership. You started to kind of go into it where it's like, okay, now how do I articulate this inner landscape to my team? Like, do I need to? Like, how much do I need to? I don't need to tell them my whole life story. So there's always like this, but they should know that, I'm in a recovered trend right now. That part's important. So how is that piece of the puzzle going? Are you finding that embracing energetic literacy is actually starting to permeate the way in which you are leading? And what do you think is energetic literacy's place in leadership in general?
Yeah, it's definitely impacting the way I'm leading because, now that every morning I'm getting my score before, I start my work day. So I'm going in to the day with the intentions of, where I'm at. My the core group that works directly with me on a day to day, like they are very aware of, this process that I've been going through, and, that I am checking my daily scores. And so if I start moving meetings around with them, they can guess that I'm probably on a recover day. Um, but what I've also been noticing is, I'm finding more pockets in my day to go take a walk, to go go take 10 minutes to ground and just recenter myself. But I'm also encouraging them to do the same. Like I am, you know, when I doing the 30-day cohort, like by following my energetic literacy, I did become more productive. Even though I was moving meetings around, the quality of my work was higher. I was still getting all the things done that week that I had set out to do. I was just doing it in a different way than I would have done it before. I was just rearranging. And so I have found myself articulating that with my team, but not just with my team. I've had conversations with my clients because, my role, I work with so many different agencies and studios and networks and streamers who are in creative advertising for entertainment. And, I think, as I mentioned earlier, one of the most fascinating parts of the 30-day cohort for me was seeing like how much the quality of my work, both the operation stuff I was doing, but also the creative stuff I was doing, how it was improving. And so, I've talked to clients about it because like if this is improving my creative and my day job isn't the creative part, their day job is the creative part. Like
Right. Right. Right.
what could it be doing for them?
Right.
And so like as far as where I think like the places for energetic literacy in the workplace, I think that is boundless. I think that like the more that the awareness of this spreads, that like it can change not only people's health and mental health and the reduce the rates of burnout, but it can also improve the outcome of the work. And that's good for everybody. So like I I've been, very grateful to see these results because I do work in such a creative industry. And, like I I'm a leader at my company, but I'm also a leader within my community. So like a lot of people look to me and talk to me about the things I'm trying. Like, you know, they reach out to me about things I post on social media and, want to have conversations. And I've always been a very open and vulnerable leader because, I am
Yeah.
such an emotional person that I can't hide. And so people have always kind of gravitated towards me and feeling like I'm a safe place to have conversations about things that maybe aren't talked about in leadership as commonly, like energy. Um, and so I I have really tried to focus on, having more conversations around energetic literacy because I've seen firsthand what it's done for me. So I the best way I can be an agent of change in the world of leadership is to share that message, to, make people aware of what my experience has been with it and how it has impacted me in a positive way. So I think that it's, I always knew that I had a big responsibility for the platform that I was on in leadership. but it's also been refreshing to see that like I can use it in such a positive way that could, just like with my kids, have ripple effects out into to the wider sphere, because I assure you, in creative advertising, the burnout rates are incredibly high. And like this world could use a lot of energetic literacy to just not only improve the quality of their work life, but also the quality of their work.
So well said. You're just pouring back into the vision with each word, which is, this is, I think what marvels me and gives me such, I don't know, awe, is that we're designed to thrive in environments that are forgiving, permissive, and validating. And thank God. But we somehow have found ourselves creating environments that are dismissive, invalidating, and punishing. And it's like, what? But our whole systems come alive in the prior. And I'm like designed by our creation, that we live in. And I just think, let's just get the good word out that you can, like you said, be more productive when you are in contact with your body's information. This isn't, we come from a place at Source that is just assuming that people want to do great work. And so we're talking to the people that, isn't that they really do want to make an impact and have a positive, impact on the world. And so we just are going to, until this physical body is no longer here, just preach the great news about how your body actually works, and then see if you can, in your own day-to-day, in your relationships, in your work environments, build more forgiving, permissive, and validating places to be. And that's how you will unlock your potential. So let's close this beautiful conversation out with you sharing with us what is the next growing edge that you're kind of leaning toward in regards to your energetic literacy. What do you feel? You know how like in yoga, you feel like, oh, in the next couple weeks, like I'm going to get that pose. Like, what is that? What is that experience that you can feel is right on the precipice of embodiment?
Well, I think what's been interesting is, as I said before, like I started writing a book in January, 2 weeks in. During that time, when I did the cohort, like it was flowing through me like nothing else has. I'm now, we're into April. I am almost finished with the final draft. And what I, as I'm going back and reading and working on this final draft, like what I see there in my writing is so much embodiment. Like the way that I describe things, it's so much more focused on the
Yes.
embody experience than anything I've written before. And so to me, like as I wind down this process, like I think it's just like it's also given me the courage to move forward with sharing my stories. Like I've written 4 books and never tried to never published them, because I wrote them for me. Like I wrote them just because that's my creative outlet. I didn't Trying to get things published is a whole nother job, and one that I wasn't willing to take on. And so like with this, by like learning to listen to my body, by learning to embody my energy and be comfortable in my own skin, which this time last year I was not. I was a completely different person in that sense. And so for me, like with energetic literacy, like I sense it all now. Like I know when I'm scared. I know what the voices in my head are like. I know the voice from my intuition versus the voice of my fear.
Good.
And like being able to now have the tools of, I always had the tools of breath, but I didn't understand fully how to breathe through the emotions of like fear and doubt and let them pass. And now I'm at a place where I can. And so when I do that, I've noticed they disappear. Like, and I'm able to move forward. And, exactly what you were saying at the top of the call of the the fear of the unknown and the uncertainty, like how uncomfortable that can be. And this process has, taught me to look at my left brain and my right brain and how both of them are responding and find a comfortable place with the two. Like I don't need to like find balance. That's the word, is finding the balance. And balance is something I just haven't had before. Like I either go too right brain or too left brain and not the happy medium. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I am treading down the medium. And that is, that's, it's kind of a road of peace. And um, so I guess I'm learning to be at peace or to just
Yeah.
be.
And
Yeah.
also what I hear in what you just shared is that you're learning how to be more whole.
Yes. That's the
Yeah.
word. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's that gives us peace when we feel whole and not
Yeah.
so lopsided or siloed. So,
Yes.
Ashley,
Fragmented.
I delight in you and who you are and the light that you bring. In the short period that you've been with the practice community, it's been a joy. And selfishly, I just want more. I just want more of you and learning and listening to see how this evolves now that you've been able to reconnect your logic with your intuition and just see what happens. Ooh, let's live into it. See what happens when you continue to allow life to emerge through your whole self.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much for creating the space and for providing language for these things. Because I think, you know, both for me and now, like as a mom too, where my kids are asking me why for everything, and I'm
Right.
having to make up things. Like I've learned in the past couple of months, like how helpful it is to have language for
Yes.
these things that like I knew intuitively,
Yep.
but I didn't know how to communicate. Again, it goes back to that articulation.
Yep.
And you and Christy have provided this space and this language to make it make sense.
You're right.
And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, we're grateful for you. Thank you for taking the time.
Of course.